All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Hiya, how you doing? It's been a heck of a week for the Walt Disney Company. All kinds of stories coming out of the House of Mouse, joining us to go on this journey through all that's happening, and particularly discuss a certain, shall we say, stock push to change the direction of the company is the infamous Mexican Iron Man, also known as Mike. Welcome aboard. First time on the channel, Mike.
First time on the channel. Great honor to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Real quick, just so the folks know, not everybody is fully aware that although you have the humorous avatar and you have the fun name, and you've become quite the character online, you're actually highly credentialed in being able to discuss this particular topic. So, can you talk a little bit about what your expertise is in the real world?
Oh yeah, in the real world. After finishing my education up at Stanford University in Oxford overseas, turned back to the States. My first job in corporate finance and accounting was at the ExxonMobil Corporation in the Miami Accounting Center, where my first tax return was a Central American chemical refinery of things like 255 million or something like that. I was about a wee young whippersnapper, and very
A little Iron Manito,
a
if
little
you
a
may
little
say.
mini jalapeno on my way of growing to be a bigger jalapeno on the finance and accounting jalapeno tree of life. And boy, did I learn a lot at that, because I reported to a assistant controller, who reported to the controller of the entire subsidiary for all of Exxon Mobil operations in all of Central America and the Caribbean and South America. So it put me at a young age at a very high level of corporate finance, and I did accounting and tax work there.
Wunderkind.
I'm sorry?
A Mexican Wunderkind. That's
Yeah.
German for sort of the kind of person who rises quickly from their youth up the ladder.
Yeah, and
Well,
fast forward,
now,
and I've had my own firm now for 16 years, and I've done over 60 through my own firm. I've done well over 60 transactions of mergers and acquisitions and corporate governance, investment type audits for investment firms that have done venture finance capital for technology and other startups and other companies seeking mezzanine financials. I think I've done about 64, 65 of those since I started my firm.
well, it's an honor to have you on the channel. I think you're the exact perfect guest to have on to talk about all of this. Before we get into it, I want to bring everybody's attention. We've been having quite the good time with all of our That Park Place writers. That includes Jonas Campbell and Lorne Connor. Valiant Renegade even shows up over there sometimes and writes an article. But we've been in conversation with Pablo Hidalgo, the content manager and member of the Lucasfilm Story Group over at Lucasfilm. And he had a question for That Park Place specifically. He said, honest question, do you think I'm at the same level as those execs? Is that what your research has uncovered? I'm genuinely curious as to why you'd think that. And he brings up chairman, chief executive officer, chairman, chairwoman. And his criticism was, why are you guys talking about me? Why aren't you investigating the higher level people at the Walt Disney Company, etc.? And to that I say, well, we are. So that's what this video is about. Let's get started with this intro. There was breaking news over the week. Susan Arnold, the LGBTQIA+, and we'll throw in some extra letters one day, I'm sure, but chairperson of the board was removed. They say it was because she's at the end of her 15-year tenure, but you'll notice there were not many articles or any articles at all talking about her tenure coming to an end until it actually happened. So I do find that interesting that all of the business journals out there, the business journalists, they seemingly had no interest in who would be the new chairperson when her time came up. Maybe that's pointing to that there were some other ways around that, and they made the decision to jettison her, although we can't know that for absolute certain. But Mark Parker is now the new chairperson of the Walt Disney Company, and he is also the CEO of Nike, which, little anecdote for those of you paying attention, Nike is quite cozy with China, and all of Hollywood is wishing that China was being a little bit nicer to them. We'll read this very quickly and then get Mike's thoughts. The Walt Disney Company Board of Directors announced that it has elected independent director Mark G. Parker as chairman of the board, effective following the annual meeting of shareholders. Mr. Parker, a 7-year member of the Disney board and executive chairman of Nike Incorporated, will succeed Susan E. Arnold, who will not stand for re-election pursuant to the 15-year term limit under Disney's board tenure policy. As a result, the size of the board will be reduced to 11 members. That is important. Mike, that's important, right? This 11-member thing.
Yeah, because at 11 members, they simply need to worry about getting 6 out of 5 for whatever they might need to get done. And it also puts the board in a different position. When you have an even number, you generally have a group dynamic at corporate governance where people are looking for consensus or at least plurality at some level. But now that it's an odd number, you're either part of the in club, that's the majority, or you're part of the out club.
That's right. And so
and that means everybody's going to want to be
provide
a part of the in club, right?
Exactly. All of this is to provide context for what we're going to get into, which, by seeing the title of the video, you know where we're going. But hang in there. We've got to lay the groundwork for how all this is happening. Mark Parker is an incredibly well-respected leader who has over 7 years as a Disney director, has helped the company effectively navigate through a time of unprecedented change. Miss Arnold said, during his 4 decades at Nike, Mark has led one of the world's most recognized consumer brands through various market evolutions and a successful CEO transition, and he is uniquely positioned to chair the Disney board during this period of transformation. I also find it interesting that Miss Arnold did not give her own positive statement as to her experience at Disney and how she would be moving on. That is typical. It's what you would normally see out of somebody who was leaving by their own volition. But again, that's speculation. We're not going to say for sure that she was removed against her own desires. Then we've got a statement from Robert Iger about it, and it goes on and on and on. The board is nominated for re-election at the company's annual meeting. Incumbent directors Mary T. Barra, Safra A. Katz, Amy L. Chang, Francis A. D'Souza, Carolyn Everson, Michael B.G. Froman, Robert Iger, he's still there, although not the chair, Maria Elena Lagomasino, Calvin R. McDonald, Mark G. Parker, and Derica W. Rice. Now, Mike, you know about these board members, correct? You're well acquainted with all of these names.
I do. I've been following for well over 3 years, well, longer than that, but I've been intensely the last 3 years been watching who's on the board and who's not. And I look forward to possibly coming back to your channel, and maybe we can go through that in a future video and go through the corporate governance, because lest we not forget, while the executives such as Iger and Chapek or Susan Arnold, I'm sorry, it's Susan Arnold and the other people that are on the board of directors who merit much more of our attention and fandom than we ever give them attention for many of the things that we're not happy with.
Exactly. And so we'll be looking to do that. That has been a common request for, months now. People wanting us to break down the board, not break them down in some sort of physical way, but break them down as in explain what's going on over there. Who are these people? And I think particularly of interest, that rises into the minds of people because of just how, shall we say, bipolar the board has been. No offense to anybody who has medical conditions, but this board has acted in a very odd manner. In June, they renewed Bob Chapek's contract, gave him a raise, did all of that ahead of schedule, and did it unanimously. And then in just, 6-7 months later, they had him taken out and replaced him with Bob Iger, and did so in an unceremonious and perhaps harsh way to the CEO who only held the position for 10 months, that being Bob Chapek. So there's a lot of interest in what's going on with the board. We'll come back to that, though, in a later video, like we said. What we really want to get to is this next paragraph that says, and Mike, am I saying this right? Trian? Is it Trian or is it Trian?
Trian Partners.
So Trian Partners LP and the Parallel Fund ILP, wholly owned subsidiaries of Trian Fund Management LP, along with other entities affiliated with Nelson Peltz. Collectively, the Trian Group have nominated Nelson Peltz, we're going to say this name a lot, hang in there, for election as director at the annual meeting in opposition to the nominees recommended by the board in opposition, and brought a proposal to amend Disney's bylaws. Note to everybody, this proposal to amend is the same process that could have been used to keep Susan Arnold as the chairperson. And there probably would not have been difficulty in doing that had leadership at Disney wanted to do so, had they wanted to keep her on. The other option was that if she was in management, she could have stayed on as the chairperson. So they could have created a figurehead, placeholder, whatever you want to call this position, that is officially management, but really has very little of substance. And then she could have also stayed on with the board as the chairperson. So just a note to everybody on that. Walt Disney Company remains open to constructive engagement and ideas that help drive shareholder value. While senior leadership of the Walt Disney Company and its board of directors have engaged with Mr. Peltz numerous times over the last few months, the board does not endorse the Trian Group nominee and recommends that shareholders not support its nominee and instead vote for all the company's nominees. So, Mike, explain that to us. What's going on there?
Well, we've got two or three things that we've got to unpack. The first thing that we've got to unpack is the fact that they didn't replace Susan Arnold's board position, which we just discussed. Number one. Number two, they put this gentleman in charge, and he is someone who has the connections with China, like you talked about earlier. He also is, many people describe.
You're talking about the Nike CEO.
The Nike CEO.
Okay.
So our new board chairman was put in place, and he's someone that's dealt with a lot of controversy. We might, we now forget, but lest we not forget that Nike was the company that had a lot of issues when it came to their labor practices, and they had a huge.
Well, let's just be totally frank, as much as we can be, given the medium that we're speaking on, and understanding that this is a new channel that we have to be extraordinarily careful with. But just to be frank, what we're discussing here, we're discussing en masse people in Asia who are working for very little and sometimes perhaps against their desires and against the hopes and dreams that they hold for their own lives. Is that sufficient, Mike? Does that declare it without actually declaring it?
Beyond indentured servitude. And
there you go.
Beyond indentured servitude. And so we have him being put in place. And what happened, there are two things happened at the same time simultaneously this week. One, we had Susan out, him in, elimination of her board slot. Simultaneously, we had Nelson Peltz, his Trian Group, trying to make a move in to A, secure a board slot, B, get some greater visibility around cost cutting and use of assets, which assets includes debt, and C, a process by which the new leadership, meaning the new CEO, beyond Iger, would be selected. And the article that you are bringing up is what happened is that he put together a presentation that was presented. He wanted to basically go to the board. The board ended up giving him a short Zoom call. I don't know if it was actually on Zoom, but it was essentially a video call.
Not the most warm welcome, you would say.
No, wasn't received in the corporate offices, either on the East Coast in Florida or the West Coast, and they only gave him a half hour, and I think they may have given him a little bit more time than that, but didn't. Apparently, it was one article reports he regards that none of the boards of directors asked a single question. None of them seemed interested in what he wanted, and didn't really receive the time of day, and he was summarily rejected in terms of what he wanted as a shareholder. Now, this Nelson Peltz fellow and Trian Partners, they have, as he expressed his own words, skin in the game. Last I counted, 900. I mean, they've got a lot of money into this thing. So
right, many millions. We can leave it at 900, many.
Yeah, over 900 specifically. And so they're not insignificant. And one of the things that it needs to be observed is that if we look at the market capitalization of Disney 22 months ago versus the stock price today, although there was a small bump up of 3 to 5%, in the last, 2 or 3 days, if we look at, where it's been hovered, averaging, on average in the last 22 months, they've lost almost $2 billion per month in terms of total market capitalization.
And let's say too, right now, nobody should be watching this video to take financial advice to make any kinds of financial decisions. Please consult your financial advisor with any of your questions that you have, and use this only as understanding Disney at large, not necessarily understanding what you should do with your own finances. There's the
absolutely. And I mentioned that not so much as financial advisor, but it's more as to lay the backdrop for what Nelson laid out in his memo, that he regards that the woes of Disney in terms of not issuing dividends, which it hasn't. This is a company where Disney has historically, and I don't know if you've ever been a Disney stockholder, WD, but I have been for a long time, and this is a company that you could count on them declaring dividends and actually paying those dividends. When
did they cease the dividends?
It's been 2 years now. 2 years. I'd have to count exactly. I'm not exactly.
So was that Was the excuse for doing so the pandemic? Was that
Well,
what they?
that was the first. Of course, that was the first. That was the first time. They later, in one of those quarters, I can't remember which one it was, they did declare one, but then they didn't pay it because they didn't have the cash flow. So,
Right.
but this is a company where, when I mentioned the woes, as Mr. Peltz indicated in his presentation, the woes are self-inflicted. Is his read, and I would have to agree with that. If anyone who's a fan of Disney, and Disney isn't so much a part, Disney is as Mr. Peltz put in his presentation, Peltz observes that Disney is a global consumer company. It's not just a theme park company. It's not just a hotel and real estate. It's not just a cruise ship. It is ABC. It is ESPN. It is Disney. It's Mickey Mouse. It's Fox. It's Lucasfilm. It's Marvel. It's Star Wars. The list goes on and on and on and on. It's Pixar. And a company like this, as Peltz observes in his memorandum, should have every advantage and be able to have every advantage, no matter what the climate is, in order to remain successful. Yet, as he observes in his presentation, the woes of Disney are self-inflicted, and some of the woes, in particular, that he notes are the overpayment from where he sits. In fact, Disney's own analysts and Wall Street analysts observe have been overpayment for certain things like Fox, which was a $73 billion
Sure. Huge
transaction.
amounts of debt taken on by that acquisition.
It was well observed that even in the case of Lucasfilm, that was overpaid for based upon an analysis at the time, but there was a bar of the Marvel transaction that happened previously, and so they deliberately overpaid. This is a company that's got a horrific balance sheet, and the track record that Mr. Peltz brings to the table. He did when he appeared on CNBC on live. When he appeared on
Squawk on the
CNBC,
street, I believe.
yeah, on Squawk, he laid out his track record, and the truth of the matter is that if you look at the companies that he's been involved with, and they have an average duration of about 6 years. The average company in a 6-year period has enjoyed more than a 900 stock basis point increase year over year compared to the S&P. So if you look at what the S&P has done, and you look at his results for the companies that he's been on, they enjoy over a 900 basis point improvement over whatever the S&P
Right.
had
So
been.
he's significantly outperforming the S&P 500. So, Mike, hold that thought because we're going to come right back to that because that's a key thing that I want to discuss. Let's get into this article. Nelson Peltz lays out his case for Disney proxy fight, slams Fox acquisition. This is on CNBC by Lillian Rizzo. And there's the Squawk Box clip up there. We'll do this, but don't let go, everybody, of this in your mind, what Mike was just talking about, which is this Peltz fellow, the companies that he comes into and starts taking action with, they're outperforming the S&P 500. We're going to come back to that. It's a big question. Disney is facing a proxy fight as Nelson Peltz's activist firm, Trian Fund Management, pushes for a seat on its board. Peltz spoke Thursday on CNBC's Squawk on the Street, making his case for the fight his firm has picked with Disney. He raised issues with Disney's $71 billion with a B acquisition of Fox in 2019 and how the company's shareholder value has eroded in recent years. Hurt this company. Fox took the dividend away. Fox turned what was once a pristine balance sheet into a mess, Peltz said. And inserting right here, that occurred under Iger, not Chapek. Don't be tricked by that, people. It's the same guy who put him in this position that's back again in his old position. On Thursday, the activist firm filed a preliminary proxy statement looking to put Peltz on Disney's board. To preempt what could be a messy proxy battle and opposing Trian, Disney on Wednesday announced that Mark Parker, the executive chairman of Nike, would become the new chairman of the board. Disney's board will now have 11 members. The activist firm said it owns about 9.4 million shares valued at approximately $900 million. Good job, Mike. Which it first accumulated a few months ago. Trian said Wednesday it believes Disney lost its way, resulting in rapid deterioration in its financial performance. Peltz also said he wants to be on the board so he can get access to internal members and tell other members if they're missing out on opportunities. Ooh, I don't need to overwhelm them, he told CNBC. I don't need more than one person on the board. And shares of Disney closed up more than 3%.
One of the things that's going to be interesting in our next video that we do next week when we talk about the board, I'm going to compare and contrast who he is and who he would be as a board member versus the other board members that are currently on there. And in terms of stature and knowledge, he eclipsed them like the sun would eclipse the moon.
Okay, so that actually brings us into the question then, Mike. Remember when we started in this article, I stopped you at the point where you were talking about how the things that he has been involved in have outpaced the S&P 500, which, according to my understanding of business, if you're outperforming the average of the other businesses of your size, then that seems to be good for business, and then business people would want you involved in their business. So, Mike, this is not according to my common understanding of how business works. Can you explain for me and for the audience, why do they not want somebody who has that sort of a track record on the board? What is it about Nelson Peltz that they, being Disney, what don't they like?
They don't want an outsider coming in and telling them what they should do and all the things that they've done wrong. And furthermore, I would conjecture, though I have no evidence or proof, I think there's something that's very wrong inside this company that has yet to be exposed, something on the order of magnitude, of multiple potential levels of magnitude of the SEC whistleblower that came out several years ago, where for 2 years in a row, they had over $3 billion in fake revenues over 2 successive years when they closed their books for 17 and 18. That led in a whistleblower case.
And we know that there was a settlement in that case as well.
Yes, sir. Indeed we do. This is the situation. Now, let me tell you how companies are supposed to be run. The investors are at the top. Okay, the investors are at the top. The stockholders are at the top. Everybody imagine that an hourglass type of scenario.
Okay, and pause right there, Mike. So let's break this down even more simply for everybody. So on the investor side for Disney, you've got massive institutional investors like BlackRock, like Vanguard, et cetera. And those are often comprised of huge amounts of average everyday Americans' retirement funds, correct, Mike?
Absolutely.
I mean, they're playing with people's, yes. And so when these companies invest in something like a Disney, they're investing the futures of vast numbers of normal, ordinary, everyday citizens. And then those ordinary, everyday citizens, they have an expectation that whatever companies they are being invested in by these huge management companies, that they're going to try to return as much as possible for them. That's why they go to work every single day and do all of the hard work that they do, and then hand it over to investors, is so that they'll do what's right with their money that they've rightly earned.
And more
Right, go
important,
on.
and equally importantly, that's a fantastic point. Almost as important or equally as important as that point that you bring up, WD. You have people that are hardworking and they have retirement funds, 401k, self, and these companies, if their money is being managed by a woke ESG DEI fund, then essentially, if I'm one of those people, then my money is going into a fund where they're destroying a family-friendly brand such as Disney that I no longer want to take my kids to those movies or my kids to those parks.
Sure.
It's
For a hypothetical idea that they'll be able to make this into something profitable that has shown itself to be absolutely false. I mean, just about everything you look at Disney, and more every day, more segments of Disney every day are going down the gutter. They're going down the drain in terms of success. I mean, we could run through the normal stuff that we do.
And they're using the average American's money and amalgamating it, because this isn't just their money. They're using the average American's money in the U.S. tax code in order to amalgamate this cash to exert power and influence in corporate governance. But see, it's the investors that they're the ones who elect the directors. That's how it's supposed to work. And the directors then hire and do contracts for the officers, your Igers, your Chapeks. So the officers report to the board reports to the investors. And then, as you go down, the officers, now they have their managers and they hire their Kathleen Kennedys and so forth. And down at the bottom, you have middle level managers, people like your Pablo Hidalgos and so forth. And then, then you get down, and then all these people are supposed to serve the customer base. So it's an hourglass type of structure that everything's supposed to be going well, but unfortunately,
you serve the customer base, because if the customers like you in mass, then the net outcome is that the company grows in its worth, thus increasing the worth of all of those average Americans that are vested into this company via the institutional investors.
Bingo. And then if everything's being done properly, then all ships sail in the directions. The investors are following the will of the people, the shareholder, the consumer brand, the popularity, the value proposition. The directors are responsible leaders and stewards of the company, and they are hiring great officers that are capable managers, and the people that fall in line, and all ships sail in the same direction. But that is not what we have here, WDW Pro.
All right. In all fairness, because we do need to be unbiased as much as possible, are there any legitimate reasons that you can see that Trian Partners should not have a representative on the board at this point?
Well, I don't think so, because let's say you're coming to me and you're our general counsel and you're very independent. And let's say I'm sitting there and I'm in the room and I'm one of the directors, and someone says, hey, we've got this other director that wants to be on the board. We got an empty slot. Susan's coming off. We need to refill her slot. And again, this is before we decided to eliminate the slot. And we got this guy, they've got $900 million. They've got almost $1 billion wrapped up in our company, Disney. This guy has got almost $1 billion wrapped up, and his average track record is that over, with a 6-year average activist board of director seat, his company on average tends to beat the S&P 500 year over year on average by well over 900 points. Does that sound like a guy that we want to add in terms of helping us make good decisions? I would say yes, unless I'm
Or better yet, the
someone.
investors would want to add.
Absolutely. But if I'm on the board, I would, yeah, exactly. Investors want, and the board would want to add. So is this not, I mean, what is the resume or bio? I mean, what do you got to do to get on this board? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like it just doesn't make any sense, except and unless this is
it appears
who's in
to
the
be a
club
sycophant
and
of some sort.
unless it's a case of, hey, this is our club and wow, we don't want anyone else in our club because we want to do whatever our Iger guy wants us to do. And in this case, I think this is a case of the CEO and Mr. Chairman Emeritus Iger is really the board's working for. I think there's chaos here. The board is not running this company. I think it's there. I think there's some kind of chaos in here.
There has to be chaos because you don't have a board that goes from one unanimous decision in June to a completely opposite decision in November. And the things that we're seeing out of this company are unprecedented. I mean, in the Walt Disney Company's history, it's earth-shattering, the idea that you would have a CEO in place for 10 months, 5 months of which was not under duress because the former CEO was instigating a behind-the-scenes coup against him. And then the CFO, I mean, this never happens in any company. This just doesn't happen, that the CFO would go behind the back of the CEO and talk to the institutional investors, then go before the board, somehow, without the knowledge of the CEO, go in front of the board. How did that happen? Who knows? But go in front of the board and threaten to leave her job if they don't remove the CEO. And all of this 8 days after a quarterly earnings report and the full earnings report for the prior year, simultaneous, 8 days after that, when she was with the CEO she's trying to take out, speaking to investors, telling them all the plans that the company has, right there with the CEO pretending that she knows that he's going to be going forward and she's helping implement all the things that he's doing. Meanwhile, did she know? Did she know she was about to do a mutiny? I mean, and if she knew that, why didn't she share it? Why didn't, how can you honestly go before all of the investors of the world and say, oh, yes, I'm, here are the projections. And yes, the CEO is accurate in this information. And secretly it's hard for me to believe that they went from that point. And in 8 days, she suddenly reversed positions completely to the point that she was willing to throw her job away. And then in 8 days, they managed to make all this happen. Yet it did.
Right. And the other thing, too, is that when we look at Trian Partners, I mean, if you click on view our portfolio, they are not this company, this fund is invested in significant companies besides Disney.
Sure. So we've got Allegiant, BNY Mellon, Cadbury, Comcast, obviously Disney, Domino's, Ferguson, Family Dollar, DuPont. It goes on and on.
General Electric, Heinz, my God, come on. You know what I mean? PepsiCo, Procter & Gamble.
Right. So let's read about them really quickly, and then I want to move on to what they're suggesting for Disney. Founded in 2005, Trian Fund Management is a multi-billion-dollar investment management firm with approximately 50 employees. They're a highly engaged share owner that combines concentrated public equity ownership with operational expertise. Leveraging the 40-plus years operating experience of their founding partners, Nelson Peltz, Ed Garden, and Peter May, Trian seeks to invest in high-quality but undervalued and underperforming public companies and to work collaboratively with management teams and boards to help companies execute operational and strategic initiatives designed to drive long-term sustainable earnings growth for the benefit of all shareholders. It goes on to talk about their portfolio companies.
Sounds good to me so far, right?
Who they are. Yeah, it's, fancy language there. I'll go with it. Lots of syllables. All right, so let's take a look now at, this is the Restore the Magic, not to be confused with Reimagine Tomorrow, another initiative that came about surrounding Disney, but had the opposite effect on their economics, it appears.
And for your channel viewers, again, what Pro is talking about is that Mr. Peltz, in the title of his presentation was Restore the Magic. That's what you're looking at on your screen, ladies and gentlemen.
Right. This is the document that was presented. All right. Mike, why don't you read this? You can see it on your screen well enough. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go for it. Read it.
Disney is the most advanced consumer entertainment company in the world. It has unrivaled global scale, irreplaceable brands, imitable parks, and can leverage the Disney flywheel to monetize its intellectual property. For those reasons, we believe the company is well positioned to succeed. However, Disney's recent share price and operating performance have been disappointing. And for example, cited our total shareholder return has materially underperformed the S&P 500 and proxy peers over 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and 10-year periods.
And they probably really didn't like those last two, Mike. Those last two, I mean, the 1 and the 3 year, they've got some excuses. The next two are harder to do.
Exactly. Disney shares are currently trading at an 8-year low, and operating performance has deteriorated, including a 50% decline in adjusted earnings per share since fiscal year 2018. We believe the current investor sentiment on Disney is low, reflecting the hard truth that Disney is a company in crisis and faces many challenges that weigh on the company's investment prospects. While we acknowledge that Disney, like many media companies, is undergoing a challenging pivot to streaming, we believe that many of the company's current problems are self-inflicted and need to be addressed. Trian believes
Agreed on that.
Trian
so let's pause there. We get the idea, I think, and then we've got the graph that shows just how the performance has been. Going all the way back to 2015, well, going back to 2013. Now, the stock price is up, right? It's up since this presentation, so just know that. Then we've got the declaration of who Trian is. We get the demonstration of what they've been able to do. And so what are some of the things, your understanding, Mike, what are your understanding of what Trian would like to see Disney do in the future that they're not currently doing?
Well, to go back to earlier, I think there's a few things. One is that they would like to see greater visibility in terms of use of assets and operational income. And use of assets is their balance sheet, their cash, their debt structure, the balance sheet issues. Because without a healthy balance sheet, you can't pay out dividends, even if the company is making money. And then number two is they want to see a strategy around cost cutting and operational performance. 3, they want a seat on the board, and 4, they want to be able to determine what is the future executive compensation like and who is going to be the executive leadership. They do have problems with, and they cite this in the materials, with the compensation levels of the executives, and they need to see a game plan, and they want to see a game plan as to where the company's going to go in terms of selecting its next executive, because let's all remember, Iger may have come back, but he only came back for a 2-year stint, or at least that's what's supposed to be.
Right. Now, Mike, I'm looking here at this this document where they've got the various directors, their tenure, and the percentage they've seen back versus the S&P 500. And I think this is a fantastic point that they make using this. If you look, there's a lot of experience that's located in only 2 people, one of whom is now exiting. Iger has 22 years. Arnold had 16.
That's correct.
It's a massive drop off after that.
And TSR is total shareholder return. What this chart does, and we can expand upon this when we get into the board of directors, you're going to see people like Carolyn Everson, McDonald, Chang, Froman. These are all people that rubber stamp things that Iger wanted to do. things like the Fox deal and other things. And that what this chart is designed to do is it's designed to make the directors accountable for what is the total shareholder return during their tenure. And someone like Susan Arnold, well, she's been there for 16 years on the board, and her track record is that there's been a 225% total shareholder return during her tenure, versus some of the other ones that have been there, say 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. They've presided over a 50% drop in total shareholder return, whereas the S&P might have only dropped 4% and all that. And then, I don't want to go through each one of these now, but the point of the matter is that for our next video, we can talk about who are these directors and why do they not make good decisions for a company of Disney size.
Right. All right. So let's take a look now. We've laid out that this is a serious attempt from this Trian Group. We know that Disney has not been performing to the level that it needs to, although it must be said that at the beginning of the worldwide situation that we hopefully have come out of now, Disney did phenomenally well. And I think it was a shock to everybody because it really fortified Chapek in his position, which it was a little bit of a shock that he even was given the CEO position. But then when the streaming situation where everybody was locked in their homes and so they were logging into Disney Plus, when that shot the stock value through the roof, I think that shocked all of these people. It was not expected that he would have that fortuitous momentum. And then when everything came back to reality, that sort of provided the opening for these Iger acolytes to begin moving back towards him, which still boggles the mind that they actually did this. We'll see how it all plays out. But so we've got a serious situation. We've got serious movement. Yes, go ahead.
I was just saying, I'm not the biggest fan of Jim Cramer, but I thought it's humorous that in his presentation, he quoted Jim Cramer, who said back in November that Disney balance sheet was a balance sheet from hell.
Well, the funny thing about Cramer is that now we know from reporting that Christine McCarthy, the CFO, who took out, essentially, we're told by the Wall Street Journal, essentially took out Chapek, cut him out at the knees and put Iger back in power, that she was actually texting Jim Cramer. And I looked at that. That was one of those, I forget which article it was, but it was an article where everybody was blaming somebody else for the situation. And that came out and I thought, oh my gosh, this place is run like a middle school. This is a middle school food fight, because why in the world would Christine McCarthy be messaging a celebrity investor or an investment TV show, talk show host who's not taken seriously by anybody at her level? Why is she texting him? So it's just a giant mess all around.
It boggles the mind. You'd think that she might have something more important to do.
When she's not a blood-sucking CFO telling people, people forget just how funny she is. And I mean that in the most awful way possible.
Or backstabbing. First thing, Chapek, in my opinion, Chapek's mistakes were threefold. He didn't move fast enough, and he didn't make sure that he had loyal people around him, starting with the CFO.
Well, he crumbled. So he should have looked at what was coming at him from the Reimagine Tomorrow stuff, and he should have recognized. He should have said, wait a minute, this guy on the Pentagon, this Jeff Morrell, he's telling me to do this one thing, and I'm getting all this pushback on the other side. And the other side really hates my guts. Maybe I should listen to the guy who doesn't hate my guts. But Christine McCarthy, she's the same one who, when the company got caught doing filming next to concentration camps in China, her response was that, well, it's generating a lot of buzz for us at the box office. And you're like, my God, woman, you are evil incarnate in this moment. Maybe there's some redemption for you down the road, but my gosh. And then later on, when they were talking about how could they cut expenditures at the parks, it came up that they could cut food portions, right? And her response to that was, well, that would help some of our guests' waistlines. You just have to sit back and go, wow. You pull an Owen Wilson and just go, wow, she is something.
Wow.
All right, so moving on. That's why when people talk about she may be in line to be the next CEO, like maybe the institutional investors owe her one for what she did. I just think, it's like putting Ursula at the top of the company. It would be a heck of a ride. I'm up for it. We'd have articles, we would have videos nonstop. All right, let's get into this. How Disney responded. So on Yahoo Finance, this
All
one
right,
is
and for
by
those of you who are watching this at home, get ready for the fun part. It's about to get interesting, people. Watch this video till the end because things are about to get real humorous, real sad, and real tragic, and real interesting right now. Sorry, pros.
That's right, Brian Sosi and Alexandra Canal. I'm going to guess on the accent there. But the title of this one is Disney CEO Bob Iger went sailing on his yacht while activist investor Nelson Peltz ramped up pressure on the media giant. With its stock price flailing and under rising pressure from activist investor Nelson Peltz of Trian Partners, newly reinstalled Disney CEO Bob Iger reportedly spent the holidays enjoying the open waters. According to a proxy statement filed by Trian Partners on Thursday, Iger, while speaking on a December 20th call, put off a virtual meeting between himself, the Disney board, and Peltz until sometime in January because he planned to sail his yacht off the coast of New Zealand. How wonderful.
Guys,
I'm sure.
Pro, as a fan of Disney, isn't it great to know that your new CEO who came back to right the ship is instead of riding the corporate ship on his own little yacht ship, enjoying his time off of New Zealand instead of doing the hard work that needs to be done and rolling up them sleeves?
Well, I'm just hopeful that he was on a carbon net zero yacht that surely this thing didn't use any oil supplies. I know as a staunch environmentalist that Iger is, he surely was being very conscious of the earth when he was on the yacht. Wind powered. The virtual meeting was eventually set for January 10th, with a Disney representative notifying Trian on December 28th the meeting would be limited to just 30 minutes. According to the statement, 15 additional minutes were tacked on at the request of the activist hedge fund after representatives expressed their disappointment with the time limitations. Gee, can't wonder why. $900 million, you get 30 minutes. Once the virtual meeting officially took place earlier this week, a person familiar with the situation tells Yahoo Finance Peltz found a highly disengaged Disney board of directors. Not a single question was asked to Peltz, the source added. Nelson is gearing up for a fight here, the source said, noting Peltz may press Disney to cut expenses, among other initiatives designed to boost profits and the sagging stock price. Let me pause right there, too, because I was watching an interview with him where he talked about that Disney should be spending more to expand the parks. So that really doesn't ring true to me, because maybe in some areas the company should be cutting their expenditures. But at the same time, he identified when I was watching him something that I can't figure out at all about Disney's strategy, which is why do they keep raising the prices for the parks and trying to limit the demand for consumers to go to their parks when there's an alternative that seems to me to be much better, which would be just expand the capacity, build more. You have nearly unlimited land for what you could ever imagine in the Walt Disney World Resort. You got 4 theme parks, and they're not landlocked at all. It's not like Disneyland over in Anaheim, where they don't have any more land really to go with. At Walt Disney World, you can keep going, and they will not do it. So
it is baffling how a company like Disney can throw away $100 or $200 million, but they can invest $5 to $15 million in assets on expansion of, say, a park ride that would be incredibly attractive, that would help generate hundreds of thousands in the short term and millions and millions and millions upon a factor of 10 to 100x in the long term. And I think that this strategy, I talked about a little bit this morning on Midnight's Edge with Tom and Andre, but this strategy is incredibly short-sighted. Disney is living off of characters and rides that are aging out pretty quickly.
That's right, and cutting out the middle class from their parks, aiming for the people who make $400,000 or more a year.
And people with that kind of money who make $400,000 or more a year, we have options. I'm one of those people. I mean, I've got options. I can go anywhere I want with my family. I can go to Universal, and last time I did go to Disney World, I'm probably part of the problem because I speed past everything, but I'm one of those. But the thing is that that we're not going to we're not going to go to tired parks. If they're banking the fact that rich people, people north of 400K are the future for they're wrong. The future is that the average Joe, the $30,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year hardworking American that is saving, and that this is a special adventure and a special time for their kids, their family, to go and have a really special experience. That's what Walt Disney created. That was the original vision, and that's what this consumer brand. This is supposed to be for all families, not just rich families. And it's a really awful strategy to just say, "Hey, people know this is we're going to create an experience for people that make north of 400." It's wrong. It's anti-democratic, and it's against the very brand on which this company was founded.
Well, Mike, I'm going to say something now that I have never said before on this channel, and I don't think I've ever put this in writing, but I'm going to say it now, and I want everybody to listen very closely to this because this has always been in my mind. If Disney as a company wants to come out and they want to champion the all of the people who have been oppressed historically, and they want to make their company more representative of all of those peoples that they have identified as having been historically oppressed, okay? And they want to modify rides and attractions and all of these things, modify their parks so that it is more palatable and more pleasant and more uplifting to all of those peoples who they have identified as being historically oppressed. And yet simultaneously, they price them out of being able to ever take their children to the parks. Then they are hypocrites and they are full of it completely. I'll let the audience figure out what they're full of, but I promise you they're full of it.
Bravo. I agree completely, sir.
All right, let's finish this one off. Peltz, who has run successful activist campaigns at well-known brands like P&G, would also like to see the dividend Disney cut during the pandemic restored, the source said. He hasn't decided if a Disney spinoff of ESPN should occur, the source added. I don't know, who's this source? Like, just ask the guy. He seems to be open to talking about it. I just really, this whole ESPN spinoff thing to me doesn't make much sense unless it has to do with gambling and unless that has to do with regulations that I don't understand. Mike, you got any thoughts on that? Just in that very narrow area?
You mean about the spinoff?
Just about the gambling regulations. That's the only reason I can come up with that it makes any sense to spin ESPN off.
Well,
you'd have to spin ABC off too because of the contracts that are shared on these.
That's
on these
correct.
deals.
Look, you're right. It wouldn't normally make sense if this company is so in debt. I would sell those things off just to get down my debt.
Well, but they're talking about a spinoff. They're not talking about selling it to somebody else.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they get so much ad revenue. The cash cow. It's such a huge cash cow. I don't know if that's where I would. I don't know. I mean, it is a huge amount of cash. Whether they spin it off or whatnot.
So I think that if they were to try to sell ESPN and ABC, it's a paperwork nightmare. It is a pragmatic nightmare because of how those parts of Disney are interconnected with all the other parts of Disney.
Well, that's the point that I made. When you really look at how they're going to sell it, they'd have to have kickback licensing deals one way or the other. And so, it's a mess. This company is so intertwined. It's a mess. What this company needs to do is it needs to get back to understanding that the hardworking American family is what comes first. It's what built this company, and this company has to be engineered for that experience, whether it's theaters, whether it's the parks, whether it's hotels, whatever it is. There are more people at the bracket of 30, 40, 50, 60,000 a year than there ever will be that might, occasionally in the 400, 500,000. And it's heartbreaking. It really is heartbreaking.
Well, Mike, think about this. Okay, you want to attract the 400,000 and up crowd, right? Globally, you want to attract the ultra elite, the ultra wealthy from around the world, because 400,000 plus in America is wealthy. 400,000 plus generally around the world is ultra wealthy, right? So you want to attract them. Fine, so be it. But here's the problem: there's a whole lot more people and there's a whole lot more money in the crowd that's below that. Why would you not also attract them?
Bravo, yes, sir. Agreed.
These are insane business strategies. It's the same insanity as when you preface a sequel trilogy to Star Wars after you just bought the property to market it to boys, and you fall for the idea that you could base it on feminine representation and thereby pull in the female demographic to play with your toys at the same level as the boys have already done so. Why would you take that risk? Why would you gamble like that on a theory? And if it had turned out to be true, then great. But guess what? It didn't. And you see these theories going on, where they play with social engineering ideas over and over and over at Disney, and they're drawing blanks because they're just this company has become ideologically driven instead of economically driven. And that's not the place. That's not the place to be. It's moved it away from you're right, from the Americana that existed in the parks. I mean, you would be hard pressed to imagine Disney actually coming up with something like the Hall of Presidents and putting something like that into a new park, because they don't believe in that sort of thing anymore.
Nope.
As a corporation.
And they don't understand what they're doing. The great thing about Disney back in the days, you'd want to go to the parks, you'd want to go to the movies, you'd want to buy the merch, you'd want to go to your Disney store. This company is just out to lunch. And let me tell you, and as we've covered here in this presentation today, our only hope is that there are because they won't listen to the average consumer. So our only hope is that there are activist investors with enough capital and enough common sense in order to right this ship to get it back to where all consumers, regardless of their economic background, can have a family fun experience and a positive experience with the brands.
You know, the fun thing about watching all of this, if there is a fun thing, is that people like you, people like me, the people that we chat with and have as guests on this channel for years have been saying, what Disney is doing is dumb. What Disney is doing is dumb. And the common refrain, the response to that has been, Disney's too big to fail. Disney knows what they're doing. You're just so small. You have no idea. And it's so interesting now that we've reached sort of that point where Disney has entered into chaos because they, you know, I mean, look, they've had 3 straight animated movies flop at the theaters, right? They're a company that's so broken that they can't operate trams to pick up grandmothers in the parking lots at their parks. That's what's going on at this company right now. That's the level of insanity. And now the same people in the same legacy media who said Disney's too big, Disney knows what they're doing, you're too little. Now they're like, oh, what is happening to Disney? This is unbelievable. How could this possibly be? You just sit back and go, well, here's the chart. Dumb, 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 dumb. Yep, those are the things they've been doing.
Well said, sir. Well said.
Well, Mike,
thanks for having me.
Enjoyed. You're welcome. I hope everybody's enjoyed this. We can't do long format all the time on the channel, but you know, there's a hunger, there's an interest in breaking these things down at this level. And I think, you know, if we did this right, this came across almost like a free college course, but one that was actually fun to go through. And I hope that everybody has come away with it with a better understanding of what's actually going on, instead of a 30-second soundbite or a 5-minute between commercials thing on corporate media. I think that we've managed to put out there sort of what's really going on. Real quick, Mike, where can people find you out here on this great, big, beautiful web?
Well, I do have a channel. You can follow me on Twitter at Mike Canola SJ on Twitter, and Mexican Iron Man on YouTube. But more commonly, I'll be on channels like Midnight's Edge, Doomcock, Loki's Mornings of Mischief, Valiant Renegade, and other YouTube channels as well. So thanks for having me. It's been my honor, and congratulations on the new channel. Your work is excellent. Been reading your work online for years, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you and honor to be on your channel.
Well, thank you so much. And the honor is all mine. I mean, you are well known, and I would say that your reputation does not even do you justice for all that you know and all that you are able to explain. So thank you for being here today. Folks, if you've not done it yet, please click the like button, hit subscribe. Make sure that you hit that notification bell so that you can find out when more videos just like this are coming your way. And as always, as we say at the end of videos on this channel, ladies and gentlemen, whatever you do, and wherever you are, keep having fun.